This is Faith Complex, hosted by Professor Jacques Berliner-Blau of Georgetown University.
Hello, my name is Jacques Berliner-Blau of Georgetown University, and you've just clicked into Faith Complex 101. My guest today is Professor José Casanova, Senior Research Fellow at the Berkley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. So, Professor Casanova, there is perhaps no one else on earth more eminently qualified to answer the following question. What is secularization?
Secularization is a very, very complex term. It has a very long history. Originally, it actually meant the transfer of property, monasteries, after the Protestant Reformation, from the church to the state and to the people. Later, it was used to characterize the transformation of Western Christian European societies from a time when they were organized through religious principles to the emancipation of the economy, the state, science, and the economy.
So let's review that. One definition comes from classical Latin. It simply refers to being of the age, the seculum, being of the time. Another definition refers to the differentiation of parts of society which were once integrated. But there's a third definition, right, which is the one we use most colloquially. What is that?
Well, lately it has been used mainly to characterize the decline of religion in modern society.
So secularization equals the decline of religion for many.
Exactly.
In colloquial terms.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this. Secularization, there was no central planning committee, there was no secularization family that put it into motion. Secularization, as you always taught us when I was your graduate student, secularization is a process. Can you explain to everybody what that means?
Well, this is what the social science, the way the social science has understood the process in European societies. But of course, it's a process that has historical agents. There are conflicts between the church and the state. There is conflict between science and religion. And this is part of the process that produces secularization.
I'm sure our viewers have often heard something about secularization hypothesis. What is secularization hypothesis?
Well, it was precisely the assumption that the more modern a society becomes, the more secular it will be, and therefore the less religious there will be. People will have no religion, will practice no religion, no beliefs. So the decline of religion to the point perhaps of its eventual disappearance.
The prediction was religion is going to disappear.
At least a lot of people assumed that this was going to be the case.
And who were some of these people?
Well, mainly the so-called, it began with the philosophers, the Enlightenment thinkers that attacked religion, but then became part of the foundations of the social sciences. So in all the founding fathers of the social sciences, in psychology, in economics, in political science, in sociology, most of them assume, from Marx to, let's say, Adam Smith, from Skinner to Freud, from Durkheim to Weber, all of them assumed that religion was going to decline.
Every great social theorist swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker.
With some exceptions. Tocqueville was the great exception, and William James, the great American psychologist, philosopher, was also an exception.
So kudos to Tocqueville, kudos to William James, because as we're now learning, secularization hypothesis is in a state of disrepair.
It is partly because as long as European ideas dominated global discourse, then European developments were assumed to be the pattern for every other society. And American developments, where you had differentiation without decline of religion, was supposed to be an exception. Today we are more and more aware that actually it is the exception, Europe which is the exception, and religious revivals are very common along with process of modernization in other parts of the world.
So the much anticipated decline of religion did not come to fruition. And in your work, you've pointed to the year 1979 as that moment in time which might have brought that to the attention of a sensitive observer. Can you tell us what happened in 1979?
Well, 1979 was significant in the sense that simultaneously and without any apparent relationship with one another, you have four developments. In Poland, with the election of the Polish Pope and the visit of Wojtyla to Poland that led to the emergence of Solidarity the year after. In Iran, the Islamic Revolution. In the United States, the electoral coming back with the fundamentalists to American politics, the election of Ronald Reagan and the emergence of the Christian right. in Latin America, the Nicaraguan Revolution. So in all parts of the world, in all worlds of development, religion entered politics.
What about disco, 1979? Did disco have anything to do with it?
Well, I assume modern culture, of course, has something to do with it, yes.
Now, there are a few sociologists out there who still champion the secularization hypothesis. Who are they? Are they just grasping at straws, or is there something to the secularization hypothesis that is valuable, that we want to hold on to?
Well, mainly it's in Europe, because in Europe, everybody experiences it's a reality, it's a fact, that most European societies are highly secular.
All right, so we've discussed secularization, we've clarified that. We've discussed secularization hypothesis. We've debunked that and shown some of its possibilities. Let's get to secularism and ism, after all. Tell us about secularism in the modern world.
Well, ism implies some kind of ideology that not only is an analysis of historical process, but claim how history ought to be, which direction history ought to take. And insofar as secularism implies not only a political doctrine of separation of church and state, but implies the assumption that indeed religion is something negative, bad for politics, bad for science, bad for living together, bad for toleration, and it should disappear, should be restrained and contained in the private sphere. This is a secularist ideology.
Now, that's a sort of hardcore heavy metal view of secularism, but there are softer versions of secularism where the state is simply neutral. Can you tell us about some of those?
Well, there are, again, you could say that today most states in the world have adopted some doctrine of secularism. Indian secularism, for instance, is very friendly to religion. American secularism is based on the dual clause of no establishment of religion at the state level and free exercise of religion in society. So actually you could say the American state promotes the free exercise of religion in society.
Right,
yes.
so there's a type of secularism that is in fact very friendly to religion. The state simply remains neutral or agnostic on the question of which religion is correct, and it aids all of them to practice and worship freely, correct?
Yes, this is the American version. India has a very similar version, but...
What about the big bad wolf of secularism?
Well,
French secularism,
well,
laïcité.
Laïcité, well, French, of course, you must understand that while in America the process was a friendly one of separation, led by sectarian Protestants, in France it was a big conflict between the new republic that came out of the French Revolution. It was very much anti-clerical, anti-religious, anti-Catholic, and the church resisting the separation.
No.
And so you have a constant conflict between both.
For many people, the French are the folks who are ripping hijabs forcibly off Muslim persons' bodies. The French are the ones who aren't permitting somebody to wear their Magen David in a classroom. Do we have a stereotype of the French version of laïcité?
Well, because the principle of neutrality there means no religion in the public sphere, meaning schools are public places, therefore no religion in the schools. In America also, you are not supposed to teach religion in public schools, but individuals have the right to wear their religious identities, their religious symbols. In France, of course, students themselves cannot wear their religious identity publicly. So therefore, religious symbols are forbidden from public schools.
Would I be correct in surmising that you much prefer the American version to the French version of secularism?
Well, insofar as I'm a liberal, I would say that takes very seriously the rights of individuals to express their conscience, their beliefs, yes. On the other hand, I think that we must realize that historically each society has its own patterns. It's very difficult to change patterns. Each type of secularism has advantages and disadvantages. I mean, a lot of Europeans look with horror the entanglements of religion and politics in American society.
I'm an American that looks at horror at the entanglement of religion and politics in American society. What's the future of the hardcore form of secularism? Does it have a future?
Probably yes, as long as you have a very hardcore Christian right or religious movement trying to bring religion to politics. Every movement produces a counter-movement.
That engenders its dialectical opposite,
Right.
the hardcore form of secularism.
But I think that I think the worst is over. I may be too optimistic, but I think American society has changed enough. As a sociologist, I was always interested in the fact that while minorities were able to bring religion and positions into the public sphere, they didn't seem in tune with the developments of public opinion in American society. And I think that we are now seeing a softening of the position on both sides.
We've been speaking to Professor José Casanova, one of the most preeminent sociologists of religion in the world. Professor Casanova is a senior fellow at the Berkley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. Thank you so much.